afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome again to our lovely bi-monthly stream of SecDataOps. My name is Neal Bridges. I did have to go to work today, and I did have to talk to my boss, and he did confirm for me that my name was Neal. So I can tell you unequivocally, my name is Neal. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Super excited for today's guest. He's definitely a longtime friend, great compatriot in this cyberspace. He's been a guest on Cyber Insecurity before in the past. I'll get to him here in a minute, but super excited to be talking about modern data security strategies in a SOC, especially as it centers around things like threat hunting and things like that. And so real quick, without further ado, let's hit a couple of rules really fast. Obviously, we do have moderators in chat. We're streaming across multiple platforms, including LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. We're streaming across a lot of platforms. X, we're streaming on X too. We do have moderators across all of those. Moderators are here to keep chat free of racist, sexist, misogynist, elitist, and otherwise toxic behavior. We have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to toxicity, so keep that stuff out of chat. My moderators will not hesitate to use that ban hammer if they catch you being toxic in chat. That's not a discouragement from chat. We absolutely welcome chatters. We love chatters. We love for you to commune with your fellow cybersecurity professionals across whatever platform you happen to be participating in. And so, feel free to use those chats and commune with your fellow cybersecurity professionals. With that being said, we absolutely love questions on stream. If you're new to the station, if you're new to the show, we do live questions. We don't have a dedicated Q&A at the end with our guest. We encourage you to drop your questions throughout the entirety of the stream. Moderators frequently grab questions, put those questions into a queue, and then push those questions up onto screen as they see fit throughout the course of the stream, just like this one here from Wolf Force Recon. Thank you very much for your service, Wolf Force Recon. Congratulations on making it through your enlistment, making it to the end of your enlistment. Truly proud of you, and stay awesome, my friend. Now, with that being said, without further ado, let's bring on our guest for today, the one, the only. Now, I have to say, before I say his name, because his name even exudes an amount of awesomeness. Like we used to have a saying in cyber insecurity, right, where it was real conversations with real people. And my friend, Mr. Rick McElroy, is the one that coined that statement years ago when you appeared on Cybersecurity the first time. Rick, thank you so much for joining us today. Oh, you're on mute. You are a victim of the mute fail.
Oh, no.
There it is.
What happens when I sat around listening to awesome music for the first 5 minutes. By the way, wanted to shout out whoever's picking the tunes before we started. Very amazing. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited that my mute button works. So,
yes, glad to know that your hardware mute is actually working for you. Now, I'm not going to let you do an intro because I love to brag about my guest, and so I'm going to do your intro for you. First and foremost, you were a United States Marine. Thank you so very much for your service, and I tried to make the notes for this crayon friendly. Please don't eat the notes.
As long as it's purple crayons, I'm good.
With that being said, you have had an amazing career, right? You were a security engineer for Booz Allen Hamilton. You've been network security manager for UPS. You've been information security manager. You worked your way up the career chain. You were a director of information security. You've been a chief information security officer. Then you were a principal cybersecurity strategist for Carbon Black for well over 8 years. And now you're the CEO of NeXasure after what I can only imagine has been a tumultuous time as you've had to live through the Carbon Black woes that have happened over the last couple years.
It was a great story, but the last chapter kind of sucked for all of us. So we'll leave it at that.
We had Jeff on last night and we heard similar. We won't focus too hard on the travesty of the last chapter of the book.
No, it's fine. Things happen in this industry. As I tell everyone, prepare for your career. So I think, again, from a career guidance perspective, be ready to tuck and roll, be educated, be on point, and always build that network. And Neal, I know those are things that you tell your audience. So thank you for continuing to reiterate that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. We do definitely, we promote the networking aspect of it pretty heavily. We hear from folks who have unfortunately been part of I think I read a statistic with something like 164,000 people across all of tech have been an unfortunate victim of layoffs this year, just due to everything that's going on. And so it's been pretty disastrous across the board. Did I miss anything phenomenal about your career? I mean, that's in and of itself. Like, did I miss anything that you'd like to highlight or talk about?
Yeah, my current journey.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. Kind of working your way up to get some semblance of wisdom and thought leadership in cybersecurity. And then I decided to ditch it and go be a complete noob at running a company. And so at 47 years old and after 25 years in InfoSec, I decided to become a complete noob. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I have to say I am uncomfortable all the time. I am constantly having to learn. I have by the way, a great support network. You're included in that, Neal. I constantly thought I was at a point in my career where I thought I knew what I was doing, and then I decided to go a different route. And so, but all that being said, for anybody that's out there really just considering some wild move, right? So maybe it's adjacent to security, maybe it's you're in risk management and you want to go be a hacker, like just do it. It's going to make you really uncomfortable. You're going to question your decision a bunch, but I will also tell you, I don't know that there's an opportunity to learn as much as I have in the last 6 months. So for that, I am truly grateful.
When you talk about learning, and I want to talk to people, you've been like, we see principal strategist, right? And I think that people don't really understand that, like what that entails. And we've had you on the stream before, and we've talked a little bit about what principal strategist was, but can you kind of talk about your role in Carbon Black and over the course of the year and what it means to be a strategist? Because I think it's really important for what we're going to talk about today, for people to really understand the connections and the influence and your role as kind of that advisor to some of the greatest leaders, in your marketplace out there.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a journey. I think the journey started off very simply. The co-founders of the organization found themselves in that role, growing organization and too much time on planes. So I think the original intention of hiring Rick was to offload some of that work. Now, that being said, I do what I do when I'm inside of an organization. I look around for opportunities. Specific to strategy, I think we had a large opportunity here. I mean, after all, we invented a market space. We had this huge role to educate folks. And so we took that, I think, very seriously. And we took that responsibility seriously. And over the course of, I think I was there almost a decade.
Yeah.
You really start to become an advisor for folks. So there's all of these amazing, super smart people in cybersecurity, but we all lack information for various reasons. We're busy, we're heads down. So what I would try to do is become a clearinghouse for wisdom in the industry for folks. So as I was out talking to someone like Neal, Neal would always have great things to say about the people leadership side of things and the cultural impact that leaders can have. Well, Neal gave me two great pieces of advice. Let me add that to the toolkit of wisdom that I now, as I'm interacting with these senior leaders, try to provide them. And so the one thing I would tell people, and I think one of the largest lessons I learned there is those conversations can start anywhere. It could be a very distinct conversation around how do I better my detection and response? How do I decrease false positives? I can't recruit and retain. Security leaders have various conversations. And so as someone who represented a brand and a vendor, it was important to me that not only our customers, but I think the general public perceive us as a security company. And to do that, you can't speak about security in a vacuum. I can't just be a person who says endpoint, detection and response is important. It is important, but it is a piece of the program, and it's just one piece. How do you tie endpoint detection and response back into prevention? How do you allow for people to look strategically at their budgets over 3 to 5 years and understand the right tool and investment in their team and tuning that, learning that, becoming competent on a piece of technology. And so what I would say is some of that comes with wisdom. And honestly, Neal, a lot of it comes from my network of amazing security professionals that I pick their brains on various problems. And when I hear good solutions, all I try to do is go, this is free. Let me give you some piece of advice I heard that's a little bit better than what you're doing. And I would hope that, over the course of that, people saw that transparently, honestly. And in a lot of cases, it didn't result in sales. And so I think if you're going to be a security strategist, you have to understand the various parts and pieces, meet people where they are, and just help them get a little bit better where you can. And I can't always offer people great advice. Sometimes I got to go tag in Neal, or I got to go tag in my other friends because you have a particular domain expertise that they could benefit from.
And I think that's really important because, like, as we talk about, roles inside of cybersecurity, I think what you're hearing, right, when Rick talks about this, right, is that role where, like, hey, like, you may have been working for Carbon Black, but I think you hit the nail on the head, right? You're not there to represent, hey, go buy Carbon Black. You're there as a continuity of information across the industry, both from a senior leader perspective and from a vendor perspective, that takes a step back and says, here's what we're seeing, broad strokes. Let me advise you and help you solve your problems.
Yes, and I think that the common pitfall to avoid there is, regardless of the jersey you're wearing, you have to be open and honest about it. Not every piece of tech is great. There's some things that you do well and some things that you just don't. And I think where we get lost in all of that is maybe we're hanging out with too many salespeople or marketing people. And so we start to think that whatever we're representing is the end all be all to what folks are doing. Instead of, I think in my role, I would try to challenge that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, are we the right solution? Why are we? Why did you make other decisions? And in each and every one of those cases, they were well informed. They had clear data to show why they made those decisions. Well, again, if I'm offering advice to someone out there trying to be better, I can't just jade it with the data that I have as an organization, right? I have to fuel that by as much of the open source intelligence as I can get. Hopefully remove some of my own bias, hopefully, because I have tools that I like. I have things that I recommend. But again, or state that up front and just tell people, like, I believe in this product. Here's why. 10 of my friends use it. They're having a great time. Their life is better. Go talk to them. Like, you don't have to, talk to me, right? But I think we get a little... we're a little too loyal to the jersey and not loyal enough to the mission of security. And that's what I see in that role.
I think that is a clippable moment right there. If anybody in chat's looking for a clippable moment, I think that is 100% spot on. So Rick, let's take your vast amount of 20 plus years of strategy and knowledge and talking to folks, and let's really laser focus this in on security operations and threat hunting. And so what I'd like to start off with you is, when you've looked across all the folks that you've talked to, when you've looked across these different companies, especially spending time at an EDR company like Carbon Black, whose part of the answer to the solution happened to be around security operations and threat hunting. If you really could, just kind of in a nutshell, what do you think are some of the fundamental elements of a successful threat hunting operation inside of a SOC?
Well, number one, I'm going to say mindset. I think it does start with the mindset that the tools don't cover everything, right? So why do we have to threat hunt? It's a proactive activity because we know we have a gap in our technology, and there's probably some telemetry we can't quite see, and we have gaps to close there, right? So I think mindset. Secondarily, I would say it has to be fueled by intel. There does need to be a large automation component that comes with this. I mean, after all, you're collecting wide swaths of data. You have to manage the ability to collect that. The cost of collecting all of that, how long do you keep it? That has compliance and regulation, in addition to the actual incident response that your team's going to do on the fly. And then I think people. But for me, I think that the SOCs that I see that are out there that are working, that are continuing to mature, that are continuing to build, have fundamentally thought about threat intelligence management, automation management, and frankly, data management. Now, they've had to involve a whole lot of other people on their teams to get to that data management piece. it's not a competency of cybersecurity, right? So I need my IT brethren and sisters to go out there and help me craft a strategy that actually works for the whole org. And so what I've kind of seen is security made a bunch of decisions on their own. Hey, Snowflake's cheaper, Elastic is cheaper, we're going to go do that. Doesn't quite fit in with the business strategy, does in fact meet the needs of security. And how does all of that play out? Well, one day somebody looks at budgets, right? And then we all know budgets get looked at. And so someone's going to look and go, well, wait a second, the CIO of the organization is paying X number of dollars for data storage and the CISO. Well, wait, if you added that both up, we could probably get a discount on that. And so there's been an interruption in programs. And I think a re-architecture of how we're doing short and near-term and long-term storage to be cost-effective and actually meet the need. And it was just missteps we made because we had to make decisions and we made them quickly. We did it in the best interests of security. But now I think holistically the orgs are really looking at this because at the end of the day, Neal, security analytics are just business analytics. Now, a lot of the security folks that are on this call don't want to hear that. And I'll give you because we're very special, and I know that we're special, and we have special cases.
That's right. We're all special.
Yeah, but like as an example, fraud detection functionalities inside of FinServe collect a massive amount of data. They make decisions and alerting in microseconds across the globe. After all, you get a notification on your phone. It's generally correct. False positives have been weeded out. Why am I not spending time with them in my SOC? Like, if I'm looking for anomalies and anomaly detections, well, I should go get some business intelligence folks. I should go get folks who have built fraud detection and anomaly, because I think there's wonderful lessons to learn there. And here's the other thing. They have piles of data. That data is super interesting from a security perspective. And so I think the other big macro factor that's going into this, Neal, is I believe security is finally starting to realize that we've said a lot of things that we don't actually have the data to back up. We haven't collected enough. We haven't analyzed it enough. And even if you just think about what vendors say on prevention of malware, well, you're looking at that through your own slice of technology with your own statistics. And so it's like we haven't conglomerated all of this stuff yet. Now, how can we do this? So this is what I'm more interested in, not the state that we're in, but like, how do we do this? Well, again, if it is just in fact part of a business and their analytics and their malicious analytics, let's call it that, well, I can start to champion that through dollars that already exist in the organization, right? Like, why do I have to spend precious InfoSec dollars to do that? No, there are other people with these competencies. Let me partner with them. Let me take advantage of them. Let me have some write some stuff on my behalf. And I will say, like, the ones that I've seen do that the best, and you can go on YouTube and look up some of this stuff. Healthcare, I think, has had to do this and taken it very seriously. I mean, they're doing some amazing things with like old storage in their environments that are out of warranty, right? That they're managing it. That I think speaks to that particular synergy amongst those two teams. And that's how I think we can culturally get better and also address this big data problem.
So you said a lot there, and I want to kind of double click on a couple of these because I think that they're super important, right? And for chat that's listening, all this spawned when we just talk about some successful elements of a threat hunting operation. You mentioned, the people, the tools around automation, but I think you hit on a key point that I think is worth double clicking on, and that's really around the data problem that exists. And you talked specifically, like you gave a very specific example that I do want to dig into, which is really around, like, you've got the CIO who says, like, hey, I need to store observability data. I need to store, my analytics that are coming from this. You may have, to your point, a fraud team or a business analytics team that's got a ton of data that exists in their org, and maybe they're using Hadoop or they're using Apache Spark or something like that. And then you've got the security team who traditionally has always just kind of said, well, let's shove all that stuff into a SIEM. And so you really do have a disparate data environment. Can you kind of highlight for folks, what does that do for the efficacy or the value or the potential downfall of successful threat hunting if you don't have access to all of the data that you need for a hunt?
I'll give you the real world example of how this kills managed detection and response teams. I have no business context. And I think most security teams on the planet, even during a regular incident, would say that. They go, something happened on a business system. And let's take a simple case. I get some sort of breadcrumb from a laptop, right? Well, who owns that laptop? Who's the person that's authorized? How many other people have been authorized on this? Are there, system accounts that have access. Like, what else can it touch? So, look, we haven't even got there with like IT asset data.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if I can start to get this now, and when you look for anomaly detection, Neal, right? And look, I'm preaching to the choir talking to you about this, but I think it's important for the audience. There are various anomalies at various levels inside of an organization. Some of those anomalies are system-based anomalies, like this weird thing is happening on this laptop. Some of them are group-based behavior, i.e. a group decided to just go do something. They're solving a business problem, but they're turning on something new. I've had this happen with every single group that I've ever been a part of. And then you start to work through and think about, global anomalies. As you look at these large multinational organizations, and so it's like, look, I have to collect data at each one of these levels, both system, then the systems, and to get the full picture of what's actually happening, right? And if you think about it, in pure terms of like physical security, well, if I don't have my hallways monitored, good luck, right? But I also need some type of office space, like who's in that office? What are they doing in there, right? And so I think for me, we've been disparately solving these data questions and challenges all on our own. The business intelligence team is trying to solve business analytics for the business. The IT team is trying to solve their own uptime and availability issues. And here's security trying to solve our own visibility. This is really what we're trying to do. And we've kind of said to the business, well, just get out of our ways, right? We're going to deploy infrastructure.
Very true.
We're going to do things in production, right? That sometimes come back to bite us. Now, my expectation of like that manifestation of outages in the real world is going to be a force point for us to have to do this. I just don't see a path forward to deploy some new endpoint prevention tool into a production server environment without IT heavily scrutinizing what that tool does from now on. And here's what stinks about all of that, Neal. We had just gotten to the point where external people following a playbook could take action inside of our environments. Like, this was a cool win. We all talked about it for 15 years.
Yes.
We finally got there. The MDRs were happy. The teams were happy. I know, because I talked to them. They were like, I can sleep and I don't need to do something at 3 a.m. All of that scrutiny is just going to increase the amount of work we all have to do with the business. Yeah. And so for the folks that are in the SOCs, that are leading these SOCs, I think it's high time that we really look across the org and go, how can these other people help us and help us solve these problems? I mean, get some of their project times to write some code for you. They've got, IT has a group of automation engineers that are amazing. Why can't I borrow some of their time for some of these efforts?
You're not wrong, but one of the things that I think is challenging, though, is there are different requirements for data across the business. And I think that the disparateness of the data architecture just naturally creates a world where you've got these sandboxes, even if we just limited it to 3. And I know that, and for the audience's sake, we're not just talking about 3, but let's just, for the sake of conversation, narrow it down to 3, where you've got business, IT, and security, right? There are different data requirements. You talk about budgeting, you talk about strategy, but how do you realistically find synergies across 3 different disparate data strategies in an organization?
Well, look, I mean, I think that has to be, and I'll, being perfectly honest, it's probably only going to be driven for financial reasons, right? So once I think the finance and procurement team kind of looks broadly at the spend and goes, whoa, we think we've got bigger leverage here due to the size and the volume of data that are in these disparate silos. I think that'll be the internal force point. Otherwise, look, I think you got to sit down with your data architects here and really, like, as a security team, well, what do you have? You have a set of requirements, right? And a lot of those are mandated, again, by regulation. So they're not, my team would like this. It's like my team has to be able to do these activities. But I just really do think that, like, security, we've been trying to solve this. How do I drive down the affordability of sticking all these logs into a SIM on our own? And now other vendors are popping up as SIM augments, or we've got better analytics for Splunk. And I'm like, oh, so you're asking people to increase their spend on Splunk. I think that's a non-starter. Like, and I want to be clear, I'm not picking on Splunk.
No. It's easy to pick on because they're a big name. Yeah,
but they're the largest, they're the largest market, in that space. And so, but when you get in with the people and you start talking to them, they're very aware of the rising cost of storage of data. And they're looking at re-architecting this stuff on the back end holistically for the company. Now, is this going to happen overnight? No. And then, there'll be a world where we're going to have to, on this journey, we're going to have to replace some of these analytics that are already exist. So if, as an example, I decided wholesale, I'm going to switch to Elastic because the overall cost for my company is just cheaper. Well, I'm going to have to build some of the analytics that come in with the security tooling, right? Like I can't, Elastic does a fine job, but it's like you're going to lose some stuff there in that journey.
Right.
But here's where I think it's all going, Neal.
Okay.
If I'm reading various tea leaves correctly, I have multiple data sources in a bunch of different areas. Well, great. If I have language models that have access to those, I can sprinkle pixie dust on top of my fundamental problem and get by for the short term, right? So meaning I'm not going to go fix the back end. I'm going to create a pretty front end where I can interact with the data in a more user-friendly way and have it do some of this analysis for me, which you're already seeing out of folks like stuffing data in the Copilot and stuff like that to really weed the false positives down, dedupe, and get to a clear of what actually happened in a rapid fashion. But the prediction, I think, is like AI is going to be helpful on that front short term. But I hope that the short-term shim of bringing in LLMs to cover this up doesn't mean that we don't fundamentally look at how we're doing this as a community.
Yeah. And I think the re-architecture thing is when I take a look back and I start to talk to my peers and my friends in this space, like, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a realization, and tell me if you think this is true or not. In 2020, and I don't mean to blame this on COVID because I'm not trying to, but it is a milestone in our history books that we will absolutely have as a bookmark into the changing world around us. All of a sudden, we got thrust into a vastly different data world through forced remote work, through, lots of changes to our socioeconomic, kind of situation. People were forced to, what I would say, expand upon our data problem and really blow up kind of the awareness of the idea of how much data exists inside of an organization, especially when you think about a largely predominant remote workforce. And I would argue since 2020, we've really seen the bell curve shoot up on how much data is in an organization, how much data then becomes available to the security team, and how much data a security team has to have the responsibility over, either for investigations or for threat hunting. I'm not sure if you saw the same thing, in that bell curve or not.
No. I absolutely agree with that statement. And I think the last piece I would add to that is I think there's been an under-assumption on the liability of collecting all that data too. Now, I'm not going to associate the recent everyone's data got released. However, I think this is like organizations are data hoarders.
Yes.
And they're hoarding data without a purpose. And that creates a giant liability for the teams that have to cover all of those data sources. And so again, look, this gets into data management more so than threat hunting and incident response. But you can't collect data without assuming there's liability to collecting that data. And I feel like we're not doing a good enough job with that.
But I think what you highlight there is increased complexity in those data requirements, right? Because while the masking, obscuring, protecting of that data may not be threat hunting specific, SOC teams still need access to it. Threat hunting teams still need access to it. There is still an exponentially growing requirement to collect it on an org by org basis, on top of the fact that historically they've been data hogs in the past. And so I do think it becomes, when you talk about your threat-informed model for threat hunting, it becomes a target that you need to be concerned about in an organization.
Yeah, and I would say specific to a lot of people providing security services. I mean, clearly that's a tactic of some of the major adversaries out there, right? And so again, I only bring that up because you can't collect things without protecting those things and or having an inventory, right? So again, going back to just good stuff.
God, it's amazing how the things that we've said for the last 20 years are coming up all over again.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone just reminded me today that it's my 20th anniversary as a CISP, Neal, today. Like that's kind of crazy. It actually struck me weird I mean, I tell people I've been doing this a while, but it struck me weird that it's 2 decades. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Let's take the threat hunting, because we mentioned the data disparity issue. I want to talk more about the tools disparity issue, because this is something obviously, like, when you and I met, I was at a large Fortune 100 health, life sciences company. I remember showing up there and trying to build this security team from scratch and realizing that there were well over 50 tools that my team needed to have access to just for security. And this was just like security tooling, IT tooling, maybe a limited amount of business tooling. And this was, I think, 2016 when you and I first met. And now we start to see a shift. We talk about Splunk, we talk about some of these other vendors that are out there. And for everybody who's listening, for the FCC who's listening, this is not a sponsored post. We're not here promoting or disparaging any type of actor. But let's talk about it for a second. We see a lot of platformization, right? We know CrowdStrike's heading towards platformization. We know Palo's going towards a lot of platformization. There's a huge move in the marketplace for platformization. How do you see that benefiting or being a detriment to security teams, to threat hunting teams, or to a SOC team as a whole?
I would say if the CISOs get their way, the net benefit will be we move away from having to license all these features, and I have a platform that actually acts as a platform, and I can grow my team on that platform over time instead of waiting around for license approvals. I'm really hoping that the CISO's voice in that kind of comes out, because frankly speaking, the CISOs do not want more modularity or like a UTM model for endpoint. It's just they're opposed to 2 years later for a feature that's already in the product, I got to pay for it, right? So
right.
I'll say I think I'm hopeful on that front that we get our way. We'll see what happens. On the net detriment side, I think there's a number of things to, I think, consider as it comes to that. We all still can't agree on the proper testing methodologies for the collection of data.
Right.
So like, all right, so I'm going to put myself back in the seats of someone building a SOC now, right? So
okay.
I've got 2 people. I took one from the network team and I took an IT person, because that's the two. I go to war with the army I have, not the one that I want, right?
Such a true statement. Such a true statement.
I got a mandate to build a SOC. Great. I'm going to start with the firewalls. I got some competency in network folks. So my first guess is the first thing I'm going to turn on is a nice big interface and a dashboard for Palo Alto or Fortinet. Name the firewall. Okay, cool. I've got a competency. I've got some alerting. I've got the ability to look through data sets there. Awesome. What's next on the endpoint? Well, maybe my existing endpoint solution is
McAfee,
an older school antivirus. Right? Maybe it's Defender, and I don't license all of the hooks to get the data that I need. Well, now I've got a distinct data gap for my team who's trying to do investigations. They're going to note that over time, hey, I had 50 investigations on this thing and I couldn't get the data. We need a project. Right? And so now we're essentially being very tactical about this project. We're going to go close this one singular visibility gap. But the problem is every time we do that, it's a new piece of tech. Like if I said to people, hey, how do you test and prove who the best NDR solution is out there? Every team is going to tell you how they test it. Every team's going to be different, and there's no standard model. Now, I'm hoping that some intrepid innovators in the AI space are really looking at this, because that would be amazing. But again, like, okay, so now I have 2 people in my SOC. Those people have to go figure out the right new solution. I'm going to send them to a conference or book a bunch of meetings with vendors. Vendors are going to say things. Now we got to prove that that's true. Look at this life cycle that's already occurred for a very distinct tactical problem. When you get strategic with that, I mean, we're talking 5, 7 years of 10 years of transformation, right? And forget if the industry changes what they're doing and goes to the cloud in the middle of your journey. Like, so all that being said, I want to speak from the perspective of the people that are currently there looking at building these things. And so I think, look, this is going to take a very thoughtful approach. Now, my understanding, again, from collecting wisdom and talking to people, what people are asking for now, I want 80%, and that's good enough. But I want it in fast. I want it quick to tune. And then my team will treat that as part of tuning operations. And we will probably not even use the last 20% of that product for a while, because we've got 5 or 6 products to get in, right? And so what their expectations of the vendors is, I want it 80% good up front. We're willing to assume it's not going to be 100. And my team is going to have to do some work. But what you're giving us is stuff that's 30%, and my team is having to eat all of this other work to do the implementation, to do the tuning, and then ultimately connect it to all of the other tools. So great. So now I have network and endpoint done, Neal, right? Now I got to go connect to something like a SIEM.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got 7 vendor choices off the top of my head I can think of, and I got a bunch of API calls I got to do, right? And now, oh, wait, my IT resource that I brought over is now dedicated to Splunk full-time. Mm-hmm. For a period of time, right? And so I even think the way we think about operationalize the tooling, and the vendors are not helping with this, by the way, right? Mm-hmm. Every vendor, we have 30 days prof services and you're up and running.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, if you're saying that to people, stop saying that, because it's not actually true. I got to live with the airbag after you put it in my car, right?
Right.
And so look, I mentioned all of those things because it's very hard when you're solving a tactical problem to pull back and think strategically. And so I think my message to the folks doing the work is like, you're going to have to get your directors and managers to really help with that. Right? Yes, they have a bunch of tactical projects that they have to go do, but they're going to have some strategic things in the org they're going to have to solve for you. Frankly speaking, dude, putting EDR on executive boxes in year 1 of EDR was a problem that I had to convince a lot of executives to let me snoop and gather data for the right reasons. We're not snooping for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
But GDPR impacts this. I mean, you got 2 years and approval boards that can approve it to go to certain countries. So all that being said, what I'm looking for out of the vendor community, and I think a better approach, is to really look at things not as singular point products and really look at a nice ecosystem of products to bring in here. So if you're solving an endpoint problem, I don't think it's correct to just look at the endpoint. I think there are weighted criteria and factors that you have to factor in there. But more importantly, one of the weighted criteria should be, does this fit into my overall strategy for tooling and management? And is it going to decrease my team's time to do that or increase the time? Because that's the fundamental thing that we're all out of, is time, right? And so I need solutions that work well together. I need to look at that partner ecosystem, and I think deploy those in a way that makes sense strategically to get the most value out of those tools.
I want to say that, like, you were speaking very much to me in my heart when you talked about, like, hey, you're going to go build a SOC, you're going to start with 2 guys. When I started at this life sciences company, like, that was like, hey, we grabbed 3 contractors that were doing help desk stuff for us. Here's your security team, go forth and build a SOC out of these security guys. And so that very much resonates with me. And I think I would like to double down on, like, some of the implementation challenges. Like, one of the things that was devoid in your example was the length of time in which these 2 tactical level folks and a leader are going to be able to do this implementation. Like, Splunk is not, and to your point, like, don't offer 30 days of professional services, because that's just not going to get the job done in 30 days. Splunk is a multi-month, and again, we're not bashing Splunk, we're not talking bad about Splunk, we're talking realistic implementation times of Splunk. It is 6+ months before you're even seeing some of the first signs of true beneficial operations, either out of a security detection and response capability, or let alone a threat hunting capability. Would you agree from your experience? Like, it's long lead times on these implementations.
Things people forget, there's an entire infrastructure that has to be built for data collection. That infrastructure has to be managed. You're going to need IT people to do that, not a core competency of security. So yes, Neal, I think the idea that you'll get immediate value out of those analytics is incorrect, and it's just a level set for people bringing tools in.
When you talk about tool implementation, it sounds like you're in favor of the academics behind platformization, but the way that we've butchered the monetization as an industry seems to be what really challenges you from acceptance in that.
I hadn't thought about that, the start of that. No, but I guess, that's a fair way to think of it. I think for various reasons, usually cost and money purposes.
Cost drives everything.
Look, I understand the argument to do it.
Yeah.
I understand the argument from the vendors to do it. I mean, I was in the room for a lot of those discussions. And so for me, it was enlightening. And by the way, as part of this, I want to encourage a bunch of us to jump over to the vendor side. They need help. They're willing to listen, and they need more of us.
I don't know that I would agree with that, but
most of them. But I would say it was enlightening, I think, because look, they have businesses to run.
Yes.
Obviously,
Yes.
they need to fuel innovation in their space and hire more engineers and more threat hunters and a back-end threat team and all of the wonderful things that it takes to actually make a security thing. So I understand the economics of it. I think what I would like to see, and I think what we're trying to do in the industry is actually get the voice of the CISO and the buyer community represented in a more meaningful way, and having that manifest in the way they're sold, bought, marketed, licensed, and certainly. And here's the other factor. And again, I don't want to get into this because I know we're really talking tactics here. Procurement.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this before.
Procurement.
Yeah.
This is a whole thing that people aren't paying attention to, and they are making all kinds of decisions for all kinds of reasons. Hence the growth of something like Defender.
Yeah.
As an example, they did quite well making an ELA that priced everybody else out of that market.
Yep.
Now, is that the right security decision? No, but as a leader, you'll make those trade-offs because I need to go spend money on Splunk.
Yes. I think that right there, that is relevant to the tactical. And you've been on this show before. We're a huge fan of trying to encourage security folks to think about the business and to think about the business impacts when it comes to security. And I want to pair two things together. What you just said there about security and the 80% comment that you made before, and I'm not sure if people heard that or were listening or may have just kind of let that one gloss off, was, security teams are willing to accept that a tool implementation is only going to result in 80% of usage capabilities, and they're okay with that. And so when you think about that, how do you rationalize that to the security teams, right? Your tactical level folks who are trying to solve problems versus the financial decisions and the trade-offs you had to make to the executive leadership?
Yeah. Well, look, the big thing there is you're going to make trade-offs. So if you think you're going to be in this career and not make a trade-off based on cost or the sprint or the downturn that your business is in, and you're a responsible leader in that organization, and you do care. I mean, I've worked for a lot of companies I cared about. Like, forget what they saw. Like, they were good people who were doing good things, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to be a good member of that community and a good member of that team, I have to think fiscally responsible. I have to sometimes say, well, wait a second, this business initiative, if I'm being a realist and not, again, just drinking security Kool-Aid, if we don't do this business initiative, we die as a business. I like this business. I like working for them. They've been very kind to me building a security program. I'm going to support that business initiative because I think it's critical for us to continue to operate as an organization. And if that means I have to wait for a security spend for 3 months, I'm a responsible leader and I'm going to make that trade-off, right? Because I like a paycheck. I like my team to be paid. I don't want us laid off. I've been part of that. It's crazy, right? Yeah. And so there's I think two things here. One that pops top of mind: don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough.
I love that.
You've heard that before, but I really kind of lived that with a leader. And I was on the other side. I was like, security's 100% or nothing. Over the course of that journey, I understood why he landed there, because frankly speaking, the business was moving so fast that by the time we got that last 20% done, we had already switched tech. We'd already added 5,000 new people to the org. So like the model itself would change just due to the business growth. And so it was like, okay, cool. Let's get out of this world of being perfect. Let's think about the business objectives that the business wants to achieve and their strategy to achieve those. How can we create flexibility in our procurement and buying process so that we can expand and grow or turn things off when the business does have a downturn? Because we have a tendency not to, think in those terms too, right? And so we buy this huge amount of storage because we think I got 10,000 employees, blah, blah, blah. Well, now you got 2,000 and none of it was your fault. But now you have this huge spend that you got to get out of your budget. Someone's going to say to you, well, you owe the vendor. You signed up for a 3-year contract. What are you going to cut staff? Like, you're cutting something, right? And so I think, again, it's thinking about the sprint that you're on, looking at open source options that are out there to get you by on those sprints. Now again, this is little bit of a security architect role, a little bit of an engineer role, but frankly speaking, Neal, I don't work with tons of people who just got to keep that one hat on all the time. I think it's a good skill set and mindset to build, especially if you're looking at something very distinct like a SOC. How does the SOC fit into the business? How do we deliver on the business objectives? Now, some of those are going to be availability. Having clear metrics that anchor to that are going to help you increase the spend and all of those things. But don't worry about like what 5 or 6 years in tech is going to look like. Like it, who knows, dude? I mean, AI is here.
Yeah.
Predictability is hard, right? I did not predict that the cloud first security model was going to become that real that fast.
Yes.
I was on the other side of that. And guess what happened? Everybody went to the cloud, right? And it looks like it's going back. So like, why worry about any of that stuff? You have a business to take care of. You have people to provide safety to in that organization. You have a bunch of different options that are out there. Go talk to people who have been through these sprints, learn from their experience. And then really, again, I think if we can start to think about the ecosystem of tools and not deploying one thing in a vacuum and starting to think about how I do tie NDR to EDR. Is that going to be through a SIM, or can I utilize existing data stores in the organization and some analytics people to do it? I don't know the answer to that. But that's the strategy portion of the game. Yeah.
I think so as you talk, we got a live question from the audience, and as a reminder to the audience, like we do ask those questions at any point in time, and we'll make sure we get them asked, right? This viewer says, love to see you online, Neal. Earlier you talked a bit about the challenges to install security software on executives. I have a similar problem. Can you elaborate a bit more on it? When we talk about like that challenge of a security team and working through those business politics, because you're just trying to provide visibility, you're just trying to provide the services, whether it's threat hunting or incident response. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what you meant by that, Rick, and what you saw and how to overcome that?
Yes, my Rick reacts moment is you haven't done enough to explain to them what you're doing. And I know that's a simple statement, right? But I'm going to put you in their shoes for a second because I love sitting in other people's point of view. I'm an exec. I'm the CEO of this company. I've been running this company a long time, and I never clicked on anything. Why do I trust you to look through all of the stuff? Because maybe, and this has happened to me, I've had IT admins snoop on people's emails.
Yes.
And then get caught. So again, I don't know what's occurred in that human being's life that leads them to a place to have a negative reaction when we want to protect them, right? But something in their business life, something has affected that. I got to get into their world a little bit, and I really got to make this case to them. And I would imagine if the symptom that you're seeing is they won't allow you to increase protection on their systems, even though they're targeted, you've explained that, all of that stuff, that there's actually a cultural issue that underlies that. Because frankly speaking, when you flip that bit, and it does flip, if you do enough work, the execs not only are going to think it's awesome that they have an amazing security team that follows them all over the globe, CEOs like to talk to each other. They like to brag about it. I had a CEO that I was so scared to go in front of. Why? It was the day after DEF CON. I had one person on my team with a 6-foot mohawk that had just shaved his head. I was in a t-shirt and flip-flops, and another one with a beard that looked like it hadn't been shaved in weeks. It was an amazing week at Black Hat DEF CON, but that Monday morning call, I called my boss and I go, boss, we're not in appropriate corporate attire. And he goes, perfect, get up here right now. And so I asked him, I go, Tom, what? He goes, he wants that impression.
Yeah.
He wants to see that he has a bunch of hackers working for him that know what they're doing. Come in here and tell him a good story.
Yeah.
And so I had almost no interaction with this guy other than sometimes he would show up and ask questions. And I took it as like this big, well, the CEO finally wants to hear from security whole. Like we look like garbage wearing hoodies. And no, what he actually cared about was one thing. He pulled out a piece of paper and it was a newspaper and it had a headline from a competitor.
Yeah.
Is this going to be us?
Yeah.
It was the Wall Street Journal, and that's all that he cared about. And so then I told him our story. I literally just told him, I walked into this company with a coffee cup for 2 days and stole 200,000 Social Security. Like, here's what we did about that problem. Hey, next step was now that we've got physical security and no one can walk into, great. He was, I think, had moved from like a detractor to security to that Hollywood archetype of who we are and what we do. And he loved us for it. Now, I don't want to feed into that archetype and stereotype. I think it's bad sometimes.
Yeah.
But that being said, it is a useful tool when you have people that want to have ninjas on their team and you show up as ninjas and you assure them that this is the right team to protect your data and you are not going to wind up in the headlines, or as much assurance as we can provide around that. My life got way easier after that. But again, it was a cultural problem. And existing in all of that were IT admins who did snoop, were people who were listening in on phone calls in the org before I got there. So why would I have an expectation that my executive would say yes when he thinks we're snooping on him? I got to build that trust there, right? And that's on the leader. Like,
I think I want to double down on that. Like, that trust thing is so important, and sometimes it's important to remember, right? Like, you're there trying to protect the org, you're there trying to provide assurances that the CEO's computer is not going to get hacked, and the street deck isn't going to get leaked early, whatever the case is. But at the same time, like, this is a guy who's probably, and I'll reference my time at a large life sciences company. He's flying around all over the world doing M&A deals. Things are going to affect share price. Like there are secret things for a private company that, yes, having an agent that can see and access all of that information. We had a CEO one time, and you'll appreciate this. He was so paranoid, and I kid you not, that he legitimately kept an old BlackBerry, one of the old hard keyboard style BlackBerries, because we couldn't literally put an MDM on it to monitor the BlackBerry, and so he did all of his M&A transactions on that old BlackBerry because it was completely unmonitorable by the IT organization. And so there is a lot of that paranoia and trust that Rick talks about that you've really got to build back up in a lot of these organizations.
And it's not your fault. So
No.
The other thing I'll say to whoever asked the question, we have a lot of baggage as an industry. So you talked about perception. I don't think the public perception of us is very high right now as an industry. I think we've got some work to do to rebuild some of that trust and show them that we can actually stop these attacks and not take down. I think there's just a little bit of rebuilding we have to do, but that's not on them. Like, the person who doesn't trust me, that's not actually on them.
Yeah,
it's on me to build that trust. It's on me to be a very thoughtful leader over time, to display the qualities that I want to see in other people in my organization. And dude, what a great opportunity to flip the top of the org. So think of it like this. Sure, you have someone that said no. So what? People say no to me all the time. I could not convince people to give me millions of dollars to go build a security program without a bunch of no's. Like, just so you know, you're going to get no. Right. But that's fine. That opportunity for a no, though, really think about what you have. You had a conversation. You've at least engaged. Yeah. You have the top of the org. You have a chance at the top of the org to flip that person into a security champion. Yeah. For me, humbly speaking, I would spend a pretty good amount of time on that problem, because if you can get the top of the org to meet the bottom of the org in the grassroots efforts that you're already doing in security and you're already doing in IT, and you actually get someone at the top who says it's about cyber safety and security, I guarantee you the rest of your life will become easier. And so again, I get a little giddy because you have a detractor and you have the opportunity to turn them into a champion. Seize that opportunity.
And let me bring this back around, because I think what you said is very important, but let's bring back around what this could impact. Like, we're talking about disparate data sources, we're talking about disparate architectures, we're talking about budget issues when it comes to a SIM versus a data lake versus an observability tool. We're talking about getting, alignment across large organizations for your security team. We're talking about, settling for 80% of a solution because you can't get buy-in, you can't get alignment across the organization, you can't get budget, you have to deal with enterprise license agreements and things like that. When you flip an organization like that, when you're starting to have conversations at the highest levels, regardless of whether you're an analyst or a CISO, is it also fair to assume that once you get traction there, once you're successful there, it becomes a lot easier for you to have a coalesced, aligned, fiscally responsible data strategy that benefits the security team?
Neal, think about the impact of a singular voice from a group of leaders talking about their security spend. Like, not the CFO hucking your security spend under the bus, or IT saying, well, we should have this budget that they're managing for antivirus. That should go to us. After all, there are servers.
That's right.
And it's like, and heck, I'm a CEO now, right? So I guess I could say this. Wouldn't it be great if my team came to me and said, we have made the right choices, we are being and I believe them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because of course they're going to check your work. Of course they're going to ask a bunch of questions, but I can almost guarantee if I've got finance, audit, IT, and security aligned, that is a very tough consortium to go against in an organization.
Yes.
Because you don't see it very often, that CIO and CISO walk in and go, here's how we're addressing this problem, being very physically responsible. So again, that behavior does start to change, because you're going to have some people downstream from the CEO that just mirror the behaviors of people around them and look for whatever successful path. Well, if you're having a successful path, building that trust, delivering on time, those things, they're gonna change the behavior, because obviously they would like to talk to the CEO too, right? And so some of that stuff, just being the example of what you want to see in the org, you don't have to fix every leader. Sometimes they'll come with you just because the prevailing winds are going in that direction.
I love it. I love it. Rick, we're at the top of the hour, and I know you got to run to another engagement. Real quick, thank you so very much for spending time with me and my community. It's been way too long since you've been on, but hopefully, the audience found this beneficial. I know I always enjoy talking to you. Real quick, floor is yours. Last minute, words of nuggets, piece of advice, or anything that you want to tell the community before I send you along your way.
My biggest piece of advice for everyone is what you knew 10 years ago is going to be partially applicable to where you are today. You're constantly going to have to relearn. And I want to be clear about this. It's probably the hardest thing in the industry to stay relevant, to stay current, to continue to seek that knowledge. And so for everybody on here, you're already doing all of those things. Just continue to do that, right? Continue to listen, continue to keep your ears open, build your own toolkit of wisdom and what you know worked for you. Start talking to other people, share that stuff out. And I think the rest of it is probably going to take care of itself.
Awesome. Rick, you have a fantastic day. I'm going to send you along your way. I'm going to talk to my community really quick, and we will catch up over text message sometime. Man, I love talking to my good friend Rick. Like he says, like he does call me and we do chat about, things that are happening in the industry. And he's got a very good point, right? It is important for you to build those networks of folks, have those people that you talk to, seek the advice. It doesn't have to be specific problems, just like what they're seeing in the industry. And honestly, just continue to network and be awesome. Thank you all for tuning in to me today for the SecDataOpsCast. In 2 weeks, we'll have another security. Actually, we're going to have a SOC manager on in 2 weeks. I'm not going to tell you who this person is just yet. You'll have to wait for the advertisement to come out, but you are going to want to pay attention, because that's going to be some more awesome security operations content as well. Tune in tomorrow for Tea with a Hacker. Tomorrow will be the day that we run our giveaways. I've been promoting it for the last week or so-ish now. So this is a reminder to hit that ! Discord and chat and hop on over to Discord. There is a giveaways channel there. Make sure that you do opt into the giveaways channel. This is how you're going to be able to participate in the giveaways. But we will be doing massive giveaways tomorrow morning at Tea with a Hacker. You do not want to miss it. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Lots of good giveaways. With that being said, my standard outro, I super appreciate all of you. You all are all awesome. Thank you so very much for tuning in. And whether you're on the red side or the blue side or still deciding, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.